Somewhere in the red interior of South Australia, the ground itself is hiding the scar of an explosion so violent that scientists still argue over exactly how large it truly was. Not large like an earthquake, large like the end of a world. A blast that, by some calculations, released energy equal to more than 100,000 of the most powerful nuclear weapons ever built. Detonated all at once, in a single instant, roughly 580 million years ago. For the next 500 million years, that scar simply vanished. Wind, water, and almost unimaginable stretches of time erased nearly every trace of it from the surface of the Earth, until all that remained was a shallow, cracked, salt-white lake bed that looked, to anyone standing on it, like nothing at all. Then, in the 1980s, two geologists working hundreds of kilometres apart, each chasing an entirely different mystery, stumbled onto the very same impossible answer. And what they eventually found buried in the rock layers above it didn't just rewrite the story of this lake. It may have rewritten the story of how complex life on Earth began in the first place. This is the story of Lake Acraman, and the discovery that changed everything scientists thought they understood about it. If you're new here, welcome. This channel exists to dig into the hidden histories written into our planet's geography, the ancient warnings, ceremonies, and catastrophes that shaped this world long before anyone was writing things down. From forgotten craters to sacred deserts, we go wherever geography, science, and mystery collide. If that sounds like your kind of journey, hit subscribe now, because today we're heading deep into the South Australian outback to a lake with a 580 million year old secret. Lake Acraman sits in the heart of the Gawler Ranges, a remote and ancient stretch of country in central South Australia, roughly midway between the wheat towns of the Eyre Peninsula and the blinding salt expanse of Lake Gairdner to the north. This is not a landscape built for comfort. It's a place of low, rounded rock domes. Geologists call them born hearts, rising out of the scrub like the backs of half-buried stone whales. Many of these domes are streaked pink and grey and split by strange, near-perfect columns of rock, the kind more often associated with dramatic volcanic coastlines than a dry inland basin. And in a sense, that's exactly what this once was. The rock beneath your feet here, known as the Gawler Range volcanics, is almost impossibly old. A colossal outpouring of superheated, fast-flowing lava that once buried 25,000 square kilometres of this landscape, one of the largest formations of its kind ever documented on the planet. That lava erupted unusually hot and fast-flowing, cooling into stacked, almost pancake, like layers of stone, split by long hexagonal columns, where the rock contracted as it cooled. By the time anything else interesting happened here, that rock had already been baking in the Australian sun for close to 1 billion years. At the centre of all this ancient stone lies the lake itself. Lake Acraman is a nearly perfect circle, roughly 20 kilometres across, and for most of the year it is bone dry, a blinding white sheet of salt crust, cracked into a mosaic of hard plates, shimmering with heat haze under the sun. At first glance, it looks like just another one of the countless ephemeral salt lakes scattered across inland Australia. But that circular shape is no accident, and it isn't the product of ordinary erosion. Beneath the salt crust lies a structural depression roughly 30 kilometres wide, the deeply buried, deeply worn down root of something scientists now believe was, in its original form, a crater stretching somewhere between 85 and 90 kilometres from rim to rim. By some estimates, the outer edge of the disturbance reached a barely believable 160 kilometres. To put that in perspective, that's a hole in the Earth's crust roughly the width of Puerto Rico, or wider than the distance separating London from Birmingham. Almost none of it survives today. 500 million years of wind, water, and geological upheaval have stripped away the crater walls, filled its floor, and buried its edges beneath layer after layer of younger rock. What remains is only the deepest root of the wound, a scar so old and so thoroughly erased that for nearly the entirety of human history, nobody on Earth knew it was there at all. Long before any of this was understood in scientific terms, this land was known, intimately, by the Barngarla, Kokatha and Wirangu peoples, three nations now collectively recognised as the Gawler Ranges Aboriginal people, whose connection to this country has been continuous for at least 30,000 years. In 2011, the Federal Court of Australia formally recognised their native title rights across roughly 34,000 square kilometres of this land, including the Gawler Ranges themselves, legal recognition, in modern law, of a relationship with this ground that long predates any surveyor's map. Unlike the deep, permanent gorges of the nearby Flinders Ranges, the Gawler Ranges hide almost no reliable surface water. There are no year-round rivers here, no permanent waterholes. For the Gawler Ranges peoples, survival in this country depended on intimate, generational knowledge of the landscape's hidden water. Rock holes carved into granite outcrops, capped with branches to slow evaporation and keep animals out. Soakages hidden beneath sandy creek beds. Even water carefully drawn from the roots of mallee trees. These rock holes were never just practical resources. They were, and remain, significant gathering places, still maintained today through ranger programs that bring traditional and contemporary land management together. This was never an empty or passive landscape to its custodians. It was read, understood, and carefully managed across hundreds of generations. When European explorers finally arrived, they discovered exactly how unforgiving this country could be without that knowledge. In 1839, Edward John Eyre crossed the southwestern edge of the Gawler Ranges and named them after the colony's governor. He described the land, in his own account, as barren, rocky and naked in the extreme, and his party couldn't locate a single reliable source of fresh water. It's a striking admission, a well-equipped European expedition, defeated by a landscape that Aboriginal families had been navigating safely for tens of thousands of years. Here is the genuinely strange part of this story, though, and it says something important about how this particular mystery differs from most. At other Australian impact sites, like the spectacular Wolf Creek crater in Western Australia, Aboriginal oral tradition preserves detailed, specific knowledge of the impact itself. The Jaru people call that crater Kandamalal, and their dreaming stories describe an evening star that grew burning hot and fell from the sky in a flash of light and dust. Researchers studying that crater have confirmed those oral histories accurately describe a real astronomical event passed down with remarkable precision across thousands of years. There is no equivalent story here at Lake Acraman. And that absence isn't a gap in Indigenous knowledge, it's a clue in itself. The Acraman impact happened roughly 580 million years ago, before insects, before fish, before anything resembling an animal had crawled onto dry land, let alone a human being. By the time the first Aboriginal ancestors arrived in Australia, tens of thousands of years ago, the crater had already been invisible for more than 500 million years. There was no falling star to remember, because there was nothing left to see. What the ancestors of the Gawler Ranges peoples inherited instead was simpler, and in some ways more impressive, an unforgiving, deceptive, waterless landscape that demanded to be understood entirely on its own terms. And they mastered it anyway. 5 years after Eyre's expedition, the surveyor John Charles Darke led a party north from Port Lincoln into this same unforgiving country, searching for land suitable for grazing. By late October, his group was retreating from the waterless interior. On the 23rd of the month, near a rock formation called Wadaki, Darke was speared during an encounter with the Aboriginal custodians of the area. His final diary entry, written that same day, describes finally reaching a plain thick with feed and fresh water, the very thing his exhausted party had been searching for through weeks of dry, hostile country. One account, recorded decades later, suggests the encounter followed an encroachment on a ceremonial site, a reminder that this land was never empty, never unclaimed, and never without consequence for those who failed to respect it. Dark died from his wounds the following night. His death halted European exploration of the Gawler Ranges for years. Today, a peak and a small town still bear his name. The first pastoral lease in the region, Yardare Station, was established on the site of a former Aboriginal camp, built around a freshwater spring. It marked the beginning of a long and difficult pastoral history in this country, a story of boom, bust, and short lives lived at the mercy of drought, heat, and distance, in a landscape that never stopped testing the people who tried to tame it. Then, more than a century later, came a very different kind of incident, one with nothing to do with violence and everything to do with an unsettling scientific puzzle. In 1980, geologist George Williams was investigating strange rock formations on the small islands scattered across Lake Acraman's dry bed. What he found didn't make immediate sense. Shatter cones, distinctive cone-shaped fracture patterns known to form under one very specific condition, the almost instantaneous, extraordinary pressure of a hypervelocity impact. There was no crater visible anywhere on the horizon, just an ordinary-looking salt lake and rock that had clearly, unmistakably, been shattered by something catastrophic. Around the same time, 300 kilometres away in the Flinders Ranges, a completely different research team was chasing a completely different mystery. Geologist Victor Gostin and his doctoral student Peter Haynes were studying ancient seafloor shale near Wilpena Pound when they uncovered a strange, chaotic layer buried in the rock, a jumble of shattered, remelted debris that simply didn't belong there, packed with microscopic shatter cones of its own. Nobody could explain where it had come from or how it had gotten there. It was in 1985 that the two mysteries collided. When Gostin described his strange debris layer to Williams, the two men realised their samples matched exactly the same mineral composition, the same unmistakable signature of extreme shock. The wreckage buried in the Flinders Ranges hadn't formed there at all. It had been hurled there through the sky from a catastrophe 300 kilometres to the west. Two unrelated investigations had just become one enormous discovery. In 1986, Williams and Gostin published their findings side by side in the journal Science, formally identifying the Acraman impact structure and confirming, for the first time, exactly how far its violence had reached. But the story wasn't finished. In 1998, more than a decade after that discovery, Gostin sat down to lunch with a paleontologist named Kathleen Gray, and what she told him would reopen the entire case. If you're waiting for the supernatural explanation here, a curse, a conspiracy, something buried and covered up, keep watching, because what Gray told Gostin over that lunch, and what researchers have pieced together since, is genuinely stranger than any legend could be. Make sure you're subscribed, because we're about to walk through exactly how scientists proved this impact may have reshaped the entire course of life on Earth. It's worth pausing here to address the theories that inevitably attach themselves to a place like this. A vast, invisible structure. A remote, sparsely populated stretch of South Australian outback. A genuine, measurable magnetic anomaly hidden underground. It's exactly the kind of combination that, online, tends to snowball into talk of buried alien wreckage, or some kind of Bermuda Triangle-style force field beneath the salt. So let's deal with the magnetic anomaly claim directly, because it happens to be true, just not in the way the rumours suggest. Geophysical surveys of Lake Acraman have detected a real circular magnetic low roughly 30 kilometres across, along with a matching gravity anomaly in the same shape. That isn't evidence of anything extraterrestrial hiding beneath the surface in the science fiction sense. It's the buried, structurally deformed, mineralogically altered floor of an ancient impact crater, rock that was violently compressed, melted, and rearranged 580 million years ago, and which still carries a different magnetic and gravitational signature from the undisturbed rock around it. Modern instruments can trace the crater's true outline this way, even though the human eye, standing on the salt, can't see any trace of it at all. As for the impact itself, even the scientists studying it in the 1980s didn't reach for an extraterrestrial explanation right away. Shattered volcanic rock can, in rare cases, result from other violent processes, and confirming an impact origin required more than a hunch. It required specific, physical proof. Researchers identified planar deformation features inside individual quartz grains, microscopic fracture patterns that form only under pressures no volcano or earthquake on Earth is known to produce, reaching several 100,000 times normal atmospheric pressure in the most intensely shocked samples. Later analysis went further, detecting a spike in iridium within the ejecta layer, a metal vanishingly rare in the Earth's crust, but far more common in asteroids and comets. It's the same forensic signature, in fact, that first convinced scientists an asteroid ended the age of the dinosaurs at the end of the Cretaceous period. Here, it did the same job. It closed the case, definitively, on where this violence had come from. What Kathleen Gray brought to that 1998 lunch was a different kind of evidence entirely, not about the impact itself, but about what happened immediately afterward. Her research into fossil microorganisms called acritarchs revealed something remarkable. Directly above the layer of impact debris, the ancient fossil record changes abruptly. The simpler, older life forms that dominate the rock below the ejecta all but disappear. Above it, an entirely new, more complex, more varied population appears and rapidly diversifies. 57 new species, emerging in what amounts to a geological blink of an eye. The timing wasn't a coincidence, it was a signature, and it pointed towards something far stranger than any rumour circulating online. So, if it isn't aliens, and it isn't some hidden force field, what is the real, grounded reason Lake Acraman deserves the weight of its reputation? The answer comes in two parts. One ancient and one immediate, and both are more unsettling than fiction. The ancient part is almost impossible to fully picture. An object roughly 4 kilometres across, screaming in from space at tens of kilometres every second, many times faster than a rifle bullet, slammed into rock that was already more than 1 billion years old. In an instant, it generated pressures and temperatures capable of melting solid stone into glass. Rock that wasn't instantly vaporized was hurled outward faster than the speed of sound, raining down as debris hundreds of kilometres away, while fine dust was blasted high into the atmosphere and may have circled the globe for months before finally settling. If the larger size estimates for the crater are correct, the energy released in that single instant may have exceeded 100,000 times the yield of the most powerful nuclear weapon ever detonated by humanity. And the aftermath, written into the fossil record immediately above the debris layer, suggests this wasn't simply a violent afternoon in deep time. It was one of only 2 impacts in the last 600 million years of Earth's history that scientists now consider serious contenders for having triggered a genuine global mass extinction. The other is the asteroid that ended the age of the dinosaurs. That is the terrifying reality behind the ancient warning. But there's a second, quieter danger here too, one that has nothing to do with deep time, and everything to do with the present moment. Lake Acraman sits on remote pastoral leasehold land, far from any town, far from mobile phone coverage, in a landscape with no permanent water and summer temperatures that regularly climb into dangerous territory. The same blinding white salt crust that makes the lake so striking to photograph can turn after rain into a treacherous skin of mud capable of swallowing a vehicle whole, stranding travellers in a landscape where help may be hours or days away, heat, distance. And dehydration remain the real measurable threats here today. Not curses, not conspiracies, just the same unforgiving arithmetic of remoteness and exposure that the Gawler Ranges peoples navigated with rock holes and inherited knowledge for 30,000 years, and that overwhelmed a well-equipped European survey party within just 5 years of first contact. In other words, the ancients were right to treat this land with caution. They simply understood, long before any scientist confirmed it, that a place doesn't need a monster in it to be genuinely dangerous. What makes Lake Acraman remarkable isn't only the scale of the ancient catastrophe buried beneath it, it's how long that catastrophe managed to hide, and how many different kinds of knowledge it eventually took to find it. Forensic geology, sharp-eyed fieldwork, patient fossil records, and a chance conversation over lunch, decades after most scientists had considered the case closed. It's a reminder that ancient knowledge and modern science aren't always in conflict. Sometimes they're simply looking at the same warning from two different directions, tens of thousands of years apart. Somewhere beneath that white salt crust, 500 million years of Earth's history is still quietly writing its own case file. What do you think? Could there be other invisible craters like this one, still hiding in plain sight? Let us know in the comments, and subscribe for the next investigation.